we're still talking about what we can do about noise, successful actions and stories maybe that we could share on strategies or things that have been done to combat noise. So would any of you like to share an experience that you've had?
I have something I'd like to add to this.
Yes.
Uh,
Please, Bill.
So one of the efforts, and this comes to the occupational noise exposure work that we are interested in at the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health. And that was an effort by one of my colleagues, Thais Murata, to develop the Safe and Sound Excellence in Hearing Loss Prevention and Innovation Award. And this is an annual award that was put together by NIOSH and the National Hearing Conservation Association to identify hearing loss prevention programs or innovators in the field of hearing loss prevention, and to basically give them, an attaboy, so to speak. There's no cash involved in this, but they get a very nice plaque. They get written up. They get the opportunity to share their success story with the world in showing how it is that their efforts to reduce hearing loss in the workplace or hearing loss in the community can take place. One of the early ones, today I'm here in Dayton, Ohio, and there is the Montgomery Water Community District, and they've done a lot to reduce the noise on their equipment that is out in the community. Either it's the garbage trucks or other utility trucks and such, and also in their water treatment plants, trying to reduce the noise exposure for their workers. And part of it is changing the attitudes of the workers towards noise so that they can realize that, yeah, if I just don't, allow this piece of machinery to be noisy, I can do something to affect my workplace and make it better. But also you can foster an awareness of noise in the workplace that then translates to the non-workplace environments. So we heard a presentation this morning by Dr. Deanna Meinke, founder of Dangerous Decibels, about hunters and recreational firearm noise exposure. And you find that in a recent paper that they looked at the statistics of how people are using hearing protection who are not former military and veterans as opposed to veterans. And you found that, I think it was something like 95% of non-veterans did not wear hearing protection while out hunting, whereas only 25% or 26% of veterans were not wearing hearing protection while out hunting. On the firing range, if they're out doing target shooting, it was a very small percentage, only about 5% of veterans that weren't wearing hearing protection on the firing range, as opposed to the non-veterans. So my point is that it's developing the awareness of noise, and that's what we're all about here, the International Noise Awareness Day, and instilling in people a habit of doing things to reduce the noise in their environment, to reduce their personal noise exposures and the noise exposures of others.
Thank you very much for sharing that, Bill. Bennett, I see you raising your hand. Please share a story of success.
Well, we do have stories of success, of course, and I applaud Bill's story for raising awareness and protecting people's hearing. That's a great way to do it. But I'd like to bring another approach in as well, which is more than voluntary, perhaps, although it has a large voluntary component that addresses Arlene's point and particularly Brigitte's point about involving the community. Because we do have, as Arline mentioned, we can have laws, but we also have people. And Brigitte has, for a long time, been talking about how we can engage the community in this discussion. So I say the soundscape approach, to me, is really one of the most effective ways to look at community noise, for example, and also in certain types of buildings, healthcare, schools, and so forth, because we can have decibel meters and we can use our phones now. They're better than they were in the past, but we still want to get to some resolution. So how do we make that happen? And I think we need to engage people. It's more than even awareness, which is great. That's a great start. We want to empower people so that they can have some control over their environment. That really gets them engaged. So how do we do that? In the community noise area, let's use an example. We can go out and measure the decibels of some source which is bothering people. Let's say it's an entertainment district, and people use it, they enjoy it, but the people who live around there don't like it in some cases. So how do we find out what's really happening? Well, we have a statement in Soundscape. We say, how do we know what people think of their sound or acoustical environment? It's very, very easy. We ask them. So we go out and engage people. So perhaps in the community noise area, the first thing that someone who is listening to this can do is talk to their local officials and ask them to have a meeting on this, have a workshop. Ask the people, what do you think of this? Start with a list of questions. What times does this bother you? Is this something that you would be in favor of? Is this something that you're not in favor of? And get the community to provide a voice. Get the community to start talking about this. And then the solutions will start to become more apparent as I love what Brigitte has called them, the local experts. The people who live there, who work there, who play there, they know what's going on because they live it every day. So once they start telling us what they're thinking, what they're feeling, how they perceive their environment, then we can develop an action plan. So to circle around back to the community regulations and laws, perhaps we should start with engaging the community to find out what it is that is really the situation there. Instead of going from the top down and saying, okay, the experts tell us certain decibel levels no good, we impose that on everyone. Well, that may solve some of the problem, but it may not solve the whole problem or make the community more livable, because that's what we all want in the end. We all want to have a livable, sustainable, wonderful place to live and have a good quality of life. So we have to start with the people who actually live there. And that's what I would propose for Noise Awareness Day. We can also move to the next level, which is empowerment, which gives the people in the community the power to speak their voice and let their concerns be heard.
Thanks, Bennett.
May I add to that?
Yes, Arline.
Aviation noise is a nationwide problem in the United States. And I would like to applaud the different groups in different cities that have taken it upon themselves to advocate for less aircraft noise intruding on their lives. After EPA sort of went out of business with respect to the Office of Noise Abatement and Control, it was left to the local communities. So it isn't just one community I'm applauding at this time. I'm applauding them across the United States. Aviation Watch is an organization that provides us with information as to which local groups in different cities, Chicago, New York City, Los Angeles, what they're doing with respect to trying to lessen the noise level. I do think that airplanes have now quieter engines, and I think we should applaud the groups for pushing in that direction. They're also looking in terms of the paths that these aircraft take. And in New York City, recently, a group of Congresspeople asked that the FAA reconsider how they determine which level of sound is intrusive on individuals, hoping that the decibel levels they use now and the average, such as the 65 DNL, should be lowered. So I think in terms of communities, when my daughter moved to Queens and I cautioned her about aircraft noise, I must say she got involved with the community group there and tried to advocate for less intrusive noise. So I'd like to give a shout out, I'll say shout out, little less, with less loudness, to the groups across the United States that are advocating on behalf of lowering the decibel levels of aircraft in local communities.
Thank you very much for that, Arline.
So if I could add something, I think this can be a really important part of our whole crowdsourcing effort, that we can get the apps out there, the calibrated external microphone apps, as Bill has been talking about, but that along with that, we have comments and ratings of how intrusive this is, at what time of day, and ease of communication. So I think we can expand our crowdsourcing efforts to include things that go along with a decibel number. So it might be noon and the level might be 80 dB and everybody's content. But if it's midnight and the level is 70, people are not. So I think we can really expand on our crowdsourcing efforts, and we can develop more sound maps and descriptions of those relationships with what's really intrusive to us and what's really affecting our quality of life. So I encourage us to keep going on the crowdsourcing front. I think we can learn a lot about local feelings and surveys that we can do this in this crowdsourcing way. One other thing that I think Minneapolis, my home, has done well is, and an interesting approach, is that the music venues, which we have a lot, and you'll have to try them all out when you come in 2 weeks to the Acoustical Society meeting, when there are music venues that are having high levels of sound, just kind of self-identified, the newish regulation is that hearing protection be made available to the people who are attending there. So there are buckets of earplugs everywhere we go. At all of the First Avenue music venues, at the sporting events, there are just big buckets of earplugs, and people are used to that now. And there are sponsors who are putting the earplugs there, and so the cost has remained low. And people are just used to picking up sets of earplugs and using them. And I think it's been a really good public awareness effort just to have that regulation in place.
That actually pulls in a question that I had, in a way, skipped over before. But what are the loudness levels at such events? What is the loudest sound that a person can hear before damaging their ears? Before they should really be using those earplugs. Do you want to comment on that, Peggy?
Sure. So we talk about 85 decibels, and we typically talk about A-weighted decibels as the kind of a threshold where we start worrying about providing hearing protection. What I find in the literature fascinating is the incredible variability in susceptibility that we see between people. For some of us, we may have no sense of excessive loudness or no signs of any kind of damage at those levels. And for some, they will be really sensitive to that. And I think we're just starting to uncover some of the sources of that variability, but certainly making sure that people have hearing protection available at levels like that would be important. We've been at events in the Metrodome and the football stadiums and in the basketball venues where it's well over 100 decibels for an extended period of time, a couple, 3-4 hours. Those are some really damaging levels. Bill probably knows more about some of those levels that we've seen in different types of environments than I do. What do you think, Bill?
Well, interestingly, the talk that I walked out on to come and join this morning was talking about temporary threshold shifts in a study that was conducted here at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And just to fill people in, I think it was presented in 2010 at the ASA meeting that was held. And they were looking at a noise exposure of 94 decibels for 15 minutes and trying to measure in humans a 10 decibel temporary threshold shift. And the purpose of the study was to look at an unprotected exposure and then apply a hearing protection device and compensate the noise exposure for the attenuation, the noise reduction of that hearing protection device at all the frequencies that we typically measure, and see whether or not you incurred the same level of temporary threshold shift. And the interesting thing is that at 94 dB, you're getting in 15 minutes with almost all of the 20 subjects, I think like 17 or 18 of the 20 subjects, they measured a temporary threshold shift. So now let's relate that to a concert venue or a sporting event where, as Peggy said, you have these very high levels for 2-3 hours. If you're walking out of those events and your ears are ringing, if you're walking out of those events and the world sounds muffled to you, you've done damage to your hearing system, you know, to your cochlea and to the hair cells. You have fatigued those hair cells, and do that enough and you will end up with a permanent threshold shift. And that's really the real bug about it. One thing that it's great that the earplugs are being made available. You know, there's some events like motor racing and the like, you just can't get away from the noise. But do they really have to set off fireworks inside of an auditorium when people don't? Do we need to have that level of noise? Do we need to have a competition as to which football team or soccer team is the loudest set of fans? And I think it's between Seattle and Kansas City as to which one's the loudest now. But the levels that the audience can sustain, or at least they've said they've measured, 140 something decibels. And folks, just an exposure like that, if you look at the occupational limits, if you look at the Environmental Protection Agency's limits, the recommendations from NIOSH, the Department of Defense, 138 decibels is a level at which you can incur permanent damage from an impulse exposure. One of Peggy's, and I don't know if you were at University of Minnesota when Dix Ward was there, but Dix Ward used to be a scientist there at University of Minnesota and did the seminal research on this in terms of noise exposures in humans and established some of these limits that we have. That, why is it 140? Well, it's because we looked at some of these exposures in humans. We've looked at these exposures in animals, and it's really an issue. So cut the noise.
Brigitte, do you have a story of success that you'd like to share on successful
I have a
actions
story
to
of
lessen
success,
noise?
which is to reduce noise. This was a project, a soundscape project in downtown Berlin, in an area where people live. They are really suffering by noise every day, to road traffic noise by 85 dB at least all over the day. And there was a place for people to do some relaxation, and this place was also very loud. And also there were other issues on this place. It's supported of the, I think it's well known now, the Nauener Platz in Germany, and it was involved people. There were people involved, they have only small apartments living around, and they wanted to use this space or place as a living room. So this was a task, and it was supported by the community and also by the ministry. And so we developed we could not protect the whole area by reducing the noise, for instance, the noise level of the streets, but we were developing based on long discussions and meetings with the involved people. We developed audio islands for this place. And so visiting this place meaning still the place is now 10 years old and frequently used. You can use this area which is protected by some nature sounds, through some nature sounds. So we did some masking by sounds in these special audio islands that people could hear downtown the city, for instance, birds. That was the wish of all these people living there. And they could also have some water plays in listening to water places. And, this was a really success because the success is measured by the use of the space. And also, this is a space after 10 years, open to the public, not damaged. There is nothing. There are some little signs like "I love you" or something. This is written somewhere, but nothing is damaged. And I thought this is probably something, this is a very good proposal, engaging the people around, that they feel that this space is their own place. They really owning it. They also do some they do something for the place to keep the place as it is, as a good place. And this is one point of the concept for participation of people. Let the people participate to create their own area. Whereby I have to say, of course, this project was funded, and you need really money to do this. But nevertheless, the concept itself, to get people involved and they tell us what they really want to have. We would never have thought about these islands if they would have not told us we need only some space here at this place where we can rest. Yeah. And so we had acousticians, we had people doing, and architects working together with the people, and each part of the place is developed together. And I think this is really, I have to say this project was also awarded through the European Commission, because it is a project which gives some strategy we can provide in different areas. We have not to do the same thing, but simply following this kind of idea, involving people, and especially looking what the place really is providing as a resource. It's not more quiet around this place, but there are places at this space, there's space at this place where you really can rest. And so I think this is for me, it's the best success story in Soundscape I have, because after 10 years it's still there.
Your comments actually, make me think of In Pursuit of Silence, which I did just watch over the last weekend. And I felt like, and I know, Arline, you were involved with that project too. I felt that that the director made a good point of that, he decided to keep the title as In Pursuit of Silence, but in some sense, it really was a pursuit of quiet or solitude. Arline, would you like to comment?
I'd like to also add another ongoing technology, maybe success. We talked about apps to be used to measure sound levels in restaurants. I'd like to get back to that, because Soundprint.
That is our last topic, so perfect. Technology and noise, yes.
Technology. As a grandmother of someone who works for Google, I better get this correct. Greg Farber developed the Soundprint app, and I have been associated with him, I think, from early on. What happened is that you now can use this app to measure the sound levels in restaurants. And my focus was maybe those restaurants that are quieter would get promoted. But there's been a lot of attention now to loudness in restaurants. And it isn't just people who are older, who do have some hearing deficits. And it's not just people with hearing loss that find it difficult to converse in restaurants. It's even younger people. As I said, my grandson, who's 24, finds that he'd like to be able to converse with his friend when they go out. Now, the success of Soundprint is that when it got some publicity recently, the site got so overwhelmed, it was shut down. And that's, I think, an endorsement. It is saying that people now feel that they can have some voice and how loud restaurants can be. And they're saying that we like them less loud. I'm not talking about those places that young people go out to listen to loud music. I'm talking about restaurants where people are going and they want to have a dinner and converse with those who are accompanying them. If you can now have some voice in expressing this, I think that is important. Then maybe restaurant owners will say, we'll have more business if we do invest in the acoustics that this restaurant can invest in to make it less noisy and more business. Remember, I'm still focusing on money. Having been a consultant to the Transit Authority, I always tend to focus on the money part. But they're also saying that maybe the music could be a little lower. So here we have technology is being used by individuals to express how they feel about eating in restaurants that may be too loud. And I think owners are going to pay attention. And I don't want the site to be so crowded that it gets shut down, because I do want people to continue to express it. But it's not just in New York City, it's in several cities that people now see that by using technology, they may be able to express how they feel about restaurants that are too loud and intrusive on good dining.
Yes,
Arline,
thank
that's
you
an
for that
excellent
comment. Bill, yes, Bill.
One of the things that, and I applaud Greg Farber for having developed the Soundprint app. It lists a measurement of the noise, and it works on the iPhone devices. There's another app that's out there that takes a slightly different approach. Rather than saying, what are the decibel levels in an environment, they ask people to make kind of a subjective evaluation of what the noise level is in that restaurant. Is it something I like? Is it something I hate? And the application was developed by Dr. Kelly Tremblay at University of Washington, and it's called the I Hear You app. Now, there's another aspect of this too. A colleague of ours, Dr. Daniel Fink from California, had suffered hearing loss as a result of a noise exposure that he experienced on New Year's Eve, and I forget what year it was, and I don't remember the restaurant. But his point is that he's become an advocate for quiet in restaurants, quiet in venues, so that he doesn't experience further hearing loss as a result of loud music, loud whatever. It can be done. However, one of the trade-offs that some of the bars and things may have is they say, well, if we have more noise, we sell more booze, so we make more money. But the question is, I see you're shaking your head. It's like it doesn't seem right, but people are maybe more drawn. The younger crowds may be more drawn to slightly noisier venues. So it's a trade-off that they can run into with regards to the noise in the environment. And personally, I like it quieter. I don't want to have to be yelling in order to communicate to the person across the table from me. And yes, I have a little bit of high frequency hearing loss, but boy, for somebody who's hearing impaired, boy, that makes it really difficult. You just cannot have a conversation. And we see that in our senior adults who have a lot more hearing impairment, say, than what I do, persons wearing hearing aids and the like, and that it can be a very difficult experience to go into a noisy venue.
Yeah, I would jump in there on that and say, when we work in restaurants and venues, for the most part, the restaurant owners are not interested in this topic. Sometimes when it's known as fine dining compared to fast food, they're more interested. But I like Peggy's idea of using crowdsourcing to influence the restaurant owners. When they see if things are going against them, they may decide to change from a business perspective what their model is. So I think it's great if we can use these apps, and they're already out there. The ratings are out there on Open Table. They're out there on Yelp. They're on some of the other apps. But I think expanding the crowdsourcing idea for noise subjective, which is really getting more soundscape data of the perceptions of noise by people and what they like and what they don't like, that can imply a lot of a pressure in the business world.
Yeah, so I concur with what all of our panelists have been saying, that it is a brand new world with all the technology that is available to us. Are there other noise awareness education materials that any of you would like to highlight at this point in our last 7 minutes? Bill.
One that I just want to bring up that is an evidence-based, communication theory-based program, and that's called the Dangerous Decibels program. And I don't know if it's already been covered during the period where I had my data blackout. but the Dangerous Decibels program was designed at the Oregon Health Sciences University, and the purpose was to see whether or not they could find ways to communicate to children, to the community at large, and to effect a change using health communication theory. And it has been an extremely successful program. It worked very well out in Oregon. It was translated into other cultures. It's been in New Zealand. It's in the training for the armed forces in New Zealand, police force in New Zealand, in Australia as well. I believe now it's being fielded in Singapore. It's been in Brazil, as well as investigations in Latin America, I think Mexico and Panama. And colleagues of ours, Dr. William Hal Martin at University of Singapore, as well as Susan Greist at the VA, NCRAR, and then Dr. Deanna Meinke from University of Northern Colorado. So look up dangerousdecibels.org. It's a really incredible program and a great tool to communicate to people in university environments as well as in children in elementary, middle school, high schools.
Thanks,
I would
Bill.
agree. Yeah, I think I see it coming up in places. I see it mentioned in places, Noisy Planet. I think there is some education. I think we can see the effects. And, you know, in really recent analysis of teen hearing, in fact, there seems to be kind of a stabilization of hearing loss. So it could very well be that educational materials are reaching younger students and that they're becoming aware of some of these things. So I like to think that we're, you know, making some progress on, and maybe social media and apps are really working in our favor. The connectedness of the next generation may help spread the word on some of these things.
Let me
Thank you.
again plug the Department of Environmental Protection's sound and noise module, which can be easily accessed on the internet. New York City is also meeting with teachers in New York City, and they're having workshops to help them introduce the sound and noise module to the classrooms, so that it's just not for New York City. It's on the website. Anyone can easily access it. And when you start with very young children, with my book, Listen to the Raindrops, starting with children at 5, copies of that book can also be accessed by contacting the New York City Department of Environmental Protection.
Thank you. And Brigitte, I wanted to let you talk about Noisella, the Noisella video. Oh, I think you might be muted, perhaps.
I don't know. So
there we go.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, Noisella is really a nice little film about how to experience the planet, concerning not only concerning noise but also concerning sound. And this is a very, it's kind of also, it meets the interest also of what Arline was saying to on education. You learn in a very nice movie about the sounds of the world, of the planet, and also this, to come back and to love the area you live with their own sounds. And this is, I think this is a very, very nice film also to say, to activate young children or students to think about the noise. It's a very funny movie, very, very short and very informative. Noisella in the sound space.
Thank you. So links to many of the resources that our panelists have mentioned are actually on our exploresound.org webpage, the one specifically supporting INAD 2018. You can find a link to most all of these materials that we've discussed. I want to take a moment to thank all of our panelists. Thank you, Arline. Thank you, Bennett. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Peggy. And thank you, Brigitte. And the Acoustical Society of America thanks all of you who have been connecting online to our YouTube live event. If you haven't already, you should subscribe to our ASA YouTube channel, because we will be posting this session and other talks that ASA sponsors at meetings, that we'll be posting them. We have been posting them and we'll be continuing to post them in the near future. So we encourage you to stay engaged, to visit our Acoustical Society of America webpage, which is at acoustical.org or exploresound.org. And you can learn more about the activities that the Acoustical Society of America is conducting towards generating, disseminating, and promoting knowledge and practical applications of acoustics. So thank you all very much. We hope that you will continue enjoying the rest of International Noise Awareness Day 2018. Do your best to help increase awareness of noise. We hope you've enjoyed the information that our distinguished panelists have shared with you, and we hope to maybe see you again next year.